Like, this is the first book I've ever written that has not been accepted into any British literary festival. It's the first book I've ever written that has not a single foreign translation. You can find it in bookstores here if you ask for it, but it's not on any of the tables. So it's been, as I suspected it might be, really dispiriting.
This is Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and you're listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. Very, very Jewish. So today, we are going to have a little bit of a diversion into the world of fiction. So Emma Forrest, who's my guest today, is an English author, filmmaker, and most importantly, per her website, podcaster. Amazing. Her latest book, Father Figure, is really the best Jewish novel that has appeared in decades. It's like something where I'm thinking like the publishing term comp titles, so similar books. I'm thinking like Portnoy's Complaint or Fear of Flying. Like it's that kind of Jewish novel. I want North American readers to know about this because it's like, this is the Jewish novel that I personally have been waiting for, but it's also set a decade ago and very much of this world. So it's not like it's some sort of historic thing that feels like dusty and of another time. It's very much of this moment. Emma Forrest, welcome to The Jewish Angle.
Thank you so much for having me.
So how did you come up with the idea of a story about I don't want to say ordinary, because Gail is not ordinary, but of an everyday Jewish schoolgirl crossing paths with an oligarch type figure?
Because when I moved back I lived in America for a long time. So I lived in California, I lived in New York, I was away for 20 years. And my mom's American. And when I came back to the UK, I walked past my old school, which was a private girls' school that I had a bursary scholarship to. And it looked completely different. And I called my sister and said, what happened to it? I'm not going to name the school. What happened to it? And she said, hadn't you heard? And then she named a oligarch, whose name you would know, and said he started sending his daughter there. And he's bought all the buildings that surround the school. And he's put an armed guard on the gate of the school. And I was like, oh my God, this is a novel. Because if I had been there at 16, I would, knowing myself at that age, had tried to inveigle my way into his life via his child, obviously. And I've always had a real interest and soft spot in any book or film, any piece of art that uses the archetype of the stranger who arrives and disrupts an entire family's life. Like a novel I really love in that vein is The Accidental by Ali Smith, and a film that's incredibly important to me. And actually, I keep finding now to quite a few novelists is Theorem by Pasolini, which I guess is Terama in Italian, by Pasolini, starring Terence Stamp, who recently died. And it's about a stranger who arrives and makes love to each member of the family and drives each of them crazy, and you don't know if he's God or the devil, and then he leaves.
So I should say listeners have not maybe necessarily yet read Father Figure. They should go do that. Gail is this teenage girl who, encounters via the teenage child of Ezra Levy. She, encounters this oligarch type guy, but she also brings out something to do with his Jewishness in him in this complicated kind of psychosexual way that's hard to, like, I can't describe it. I just want to talk a little bit about Ezra, just because the Western canon is full of men like that, right? The Jew, How did you decide to take somebody like that and make him like a man?
I looked up how many of us there are here. It is tiny. It's like 250,000 Jews in the United Kingdom. 4 million Muslims in the United Kingdom. We're microscopic. So hyper aware, probably the way people were when Summer of Sam happened, like where you find out David Berkowitz is Jewish and you're like, for frig's sake, like this is not helpful. So there kept being these British figures through my childhood of whom I was very aware, who just felt profoundly unhelpful, like Robert Maxwell, Philip Green, who owned, Topshop. There's a very famous figure here. I don't know if he translates there, called Sir Alan Sugar, who owned one of the big football. I think did he own Tottenham? It was chairman of Tottenham Football Club, and these just like awful sort of Nazi caricatures of hideous Jewish billionaires. And the only comfort I've had recently is the only person who looks remotely like them, I noticed, and this really struck me, is Mohammed Hadid, the father of Bella and Gigi Hadid. If you want to tap into the idea that we come from the same place, right? The only one who's presented such an archetypal, like gross Nazi figure as those men is him. And so humanizing, all the Jewish men I know are so benign and beta. So the idea of like an alpha Jewish male is anathema for me anyway. Pretty much the men closest in my life were my dad, and I don't know if you know the great investigative journalist John Ronson, who wrote The Psychopath Test and The Men Who Stare at Ghosts. I grew up with him. So those are the two guys I knew, and they're very, very gentle. So I'm fascinated by what if a Jewish man was tough? I'm like, what? What are you talking? How would that be? The Israeli cabinet would disprove that image. But yeah, it's certainly, I grew up with this very sort of beta idea of the Jewish male. So I think that's why I wanted to know what are the layers and the ribbons and the flavors inside someone who presents as very alpha, but whose main vulnerability is wanting to be part of the British establishment.
I just, the girls' school stuff, I went to a girls' school in Manhattan when I was quite young, and it felt just so beautifully described. I mean, the stuff about everybody having at least a bit of an eating disorder seemed pretty true, but also, but I wanted to ask you, so Dar is Gail's mother in the book. She and Gail are both such full characters, and it's such a realistic mother-daughter relationship. I especially like the part where Dar thinks she's going to help out by getting Gail invited to a party, and it just turns out she's read everything wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you write the mother-daughter getting both sides so well.
I guess because I've been both. I'm a single mom, and my daughter's coming into the cusp of adolescence. I always write about the things that are scaring me in order to make them safe. And it usually works. And there was just an incredibly bad decision when my sister and I were kids that we would be moved from the state school, which in Canada is that public school,
public school. Yeah.
Right. So we would be moved from a state school by my grandfather, who was able to afford to put us in a private primary school, which I guess is, what do you call it when you're little, when you're like...
Elementary school.
8, 9, 10. Elementary.
I'm probably getting it wrong doing the American, but yeah, go on.
So
yeah.
He paid for us to go to elementary school privately, and we were the only Jews, and there was one Black kid who I think was the son of the Nigerian diplomat to England. And my sister's class was okay. My class was really anti-Semitic, and they were so young. So they were like 8, 9, 10. It was coming from the parents, which you figure out, but also explicitly they were saying, my mother says. It was actually the school that Catherine and William, the now king, and is he king yet? Almost king, ended up sending their kids to. Like in my class, Winston Churchill's great-granddaughter was in my class with me. It was one of Lady Diana's bridesmaids was in the class. It was the wrong place for us, and it really scarred me. And even I remember, like, there was a particular bully who was the daughter of a Greek shipping magnate, and she would do all the stuff about, don't you feel bad for killing Christ? And she would call me the N-word. Like, someone has to really want to say the N-word to say it to someone who like has curly hair, and that's it. And it took honestly, I swear, being in my mid-20s and one day just sitting on a bus and going, hang on the ethnic scale, from like Nubian to Swedish, Greek and Jew fall in the same place. Like, so what? This wasn't even appropriate bullying. Like, this is just crazy. And I think I realized quite late how deeply ingrained that period and that mistake of sending us there, of trying to make us sit alongside the British establishment was. And with my daughter, I've gone completely the other way. As she's only been in state schools, in public schools. They're completely mixed. They're heavily Muslim and Jewish, her local school, because we're in North London. And it's been night and day.
That's interesting. I have so much to say on this. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I also went to a school of that sort until high school, like from when I was 5 to when I was 13. And I don't think it was quite the same in terms of Jewishness as it would have been in England, but at the same time, it wasn't entirely different. Like, I did hear the Jews killed Jesus thing. I definitely heard a lot of I remember thinking that to be attractive, you had to basically look like Claudia Schiffer.
Right.
And being shocked when I went to college in Chicago that women who looked like me were not considered repulsive for not looking like Claudia Schiffer, and that men who had grown up around women who looked like that found women who looked like me exotic in a good way. It was very, very confusing. It was a very confusing time. But so there are a couple connections, though, to father figure that I want to talk about. I mean, there's this one amazing moment where Gail is in a police car with a man who...
Yeah.
And it feels like you're very in this very modern novel, like people are from marginalized identity groups, and there's a gay man who's been picked up for public sex. And he says he wouldn't, though, with George Michael. And why is that?
He's too foreign.
It's just like this amazing punchline. And I was thinking about that when you were saying the thing about the Greek shipping magnate, that scene.
And by the way, you mentioned your writing, and you're completely right. It's absolutely significant that George Michael, he actually talks about his Jewishness on Desert Island Discs, finding out late, fairly late, that his mother was Jewish. And it explains to me a great deal about what we love about George Michael, that he has, despite this sort of very traditionally, for a gay guy, macho, very macho, alpha presenting, almost Tom of Finland look, this anxiety, he has an anxiety and vulnerability to his work, like a neurosis, basically.
Yeah.
And I found it very moving to realize that someone I loved that much had realized that about himself. And yeah, he's there for a reason.
So the scene that is going to be like anybody who's doing any kind of Jewish book awards, not that you shouldn't get the mainstream book awards too, but like the Jewish book awards specifically, that scene in the Anne Frank house is like, so are you familiar with the Seinfeld Schindler's List makeout? Okay.
I took my daughter to Anne Frank house, and I didn't know if I had the courage to write this down. So I wrote it down in sort of a satirical way in the book. I was struck by what a lovely place it was, with a lovely view and lovely light, if it wasn't being used for what it's been used for. So, the Shiksa stepmother verbalizes. She gets worried that she wants to make an offer on it to purchase the apartment. But I thought, as you walk through there, because it's you walk in single file through the annex, and that means you can't really tell what's going on with the people but behind or in front of you. And I thought this would be a really good place to have an illicit touch.
I found the kiss aspect of it very subversive, in that it's subverting sort of two different tropes. Like, there's the Jewish man who is sort of aroused by the shiksa-ness, right, of a non-Jewish woman, is kind of, you get this obviously in like Woody Allen, Philip Roth, Seinfeld, or more recently in Nobody Wants This. Like, it's old and it hasn't gone anywhere. There's also the 19th century sort of beautiful Jewess trope where it's a non-Jewish man who's going for the exoticness to him of a Jewish woman. But this subverts both of those. And it's this, like, there's another part where, I don't remember which part of the novel this was, where Ezra is saying that, like, he could see that a certain type of man would find Gail attractive, but he doesn't. He's telling himself. Yeah.
This is a pretty big one to drop, but one of my good friends who I've known for decades grew up with Georgina Chapman, who was the wife of Harvey Weinstein. So there were times I was around Harvey, a couple of times, and he just had no idea how to interact with me because of my Jewishness. Like, I knew that's what it was about. He could not make any sense of me. There are slivers of those brief experiences with Harvey in how I thought Ezra might react to Gail.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your friend and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
Why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
So I wanted to ask you, the Father Figure is not a political book in the sense of promoting any party or ideology, and but it also doesn't shy away from contentious topics. And I was wondering what it was like writing a book that deals so directly with Jewish identity and with British Jews' differing views about Israel in this moment.
When you said all the really wonderful things about this book, it brought tears to my eyes because this book has been rejected. Like, this is the first book I've ever written that has not been accepted into any British literary festival. None. I did one in Scotland, but nothing in England. And there's 10 big literary festivals in a year here. None of them took it. It has no foreign translations. It's the first book I've ever written that has not a single foreign translation. You can find it in bookstores here if you ask for it, but it's not on any of the tables. And the people I know who have blurbed my other books or supported my other books publicly who aren't Jewish have, when I say not responded, like I sent proofs to them. I asked if they got them. They said yes, they received them. I never had anything ever again. So it's been, as I suspected it might be, but that doesn't lessen the hurt, really dispiriting, is the truth.
Do you think it's just the amount of Jewish content? Do you think it's the fact that it is not taking Dar's side in some sort of unambiguous way?
I think people are really scared. One of the great supporters of it is a wonderful writer called Nusayba Yunus, who wrote a great book called Fundamentally, a great novel, and she was a not just a practicing Muslim, but a very seriously practicing Muslim until she sort of moved away from religion entirely. And she wrote a novel that's comedic about being sent to Iraq to de-radicalize ISIS brides. It is the most brave, amazing book, and she has the bravery and the complexity to have read Father Figure and gone, I love it. And people are scared. I've had people who are my friends say, and these are all people who are not Jewish, say that only I've asked, when they're fundraising for Gaza, is it this is, many times over the course of the last 2 years, would it be possible to mention the hostages? And maybe certainly the one time famous person A mentioned the hostages, they got so many death threats that they were scared, which I understand. And a public figure number 2 was straight with me and said her management had told her that she can't speak about them because it will damage her career. So that's where we are. And people like things to be black and white. And I mean, if you want to start a really basic level, the way I try and go in is with all the things you could say legitimately to criticize Israel, and there are a lot. The idea that Palestinians are brown and Israelis are white is crazy. That's crazy. That's just not the truth. And I've said over and over, and I have said it publicly on my Instagram, that in my opinion, the reason those hostage posters keep getting ripped down is that when you have 250 faces, you're going to have to guess that that's a fairly accurate representation of Israeli society. A couple of them are white or white passing. Those are brown people because they either come from roots that were always there or they come from the places they were expelled from for being Jews. So that undoes people already. They just can't. That completely unanchors them and confuses them. And it's been dispiriting, but not unexpected. But that doesn't make it easier.
I think something so interesting in father figure is that it's Gail, the younger person, who is sort of taking the, I don't want to say pro-Israel position in some kind of she's not, pro-settler, but she's taking more of a,
that's the influence of Hanif Qureshi, who has written a lot in his books about the immigrant experience, about the next generation being more conservative than their parents. And also, we all, as much as we love our parents, hate a part of our parents. So you react and are whatever they are not. And that's where that comes from for Gail. But yeah, I think the archetype of, especially with single parents, of the younger generation being more conservative is fairly accurate, actually.
I just want to talk to you about your reactions to the horrific attack at a Manchester synagogue, and also just to, what has changed really maybe since October 7th, 2023 in British Jewish life.
Oh my God, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. Again, another good friend who's a really good friend. And when I say a good friend, I mean people who check in with me on the anniversary of October 7th, to see how I'm doing, but who've been very open that they cannot say anything publicly. A friend who was like, I of course I wanted to post something on Instagram after the synagogue attack, the way you would if it happened to any other group, but I just feel like people decide it means something and that it would damage my work. And she's not wrong, We were in services and we all had our phones off, obviously. And then we came out and, we're told, move, do not congregate, keep going. My daughter was right on the cusp of, she's 12, so she's right in the place of I'll do what I like. And she's like, why do I have to move? And I remember I looked around and I was like, because people come to synagogues to kill Jews. And then we, headed home and turned on the phones, and there it was. Life's been really bad. She was at the end when October 7th happened. My kid was just at the end of elementary school. And I remember there was particularly, there was a white Irish family who never spoke to us ever again. They never, not only did nobody say, this is awful, are you okay? We just want, that was the thing, is that there was never that beat. I'm sure this happened not just in the UK, everywhere. everyone in my publishing life, only my book agent is Jewish. No one else is. And the woman who started my career, who first published me on October 7th, she was on Instagram organizing a fundraiser for Gaza. And there just was no beat or moment before that where she or anyone said, we're really sorry this happened. This must be incredibly traumatic. There were two British feminist writers who went out of their way on their Instagram and said there is no historical context that makes rape as a tool of war acceptable. Not another person that I can think of. No other female writer said that.
Do you remember which writers that was?
Yeah, I do. And the awful thing is that I want to name them because I'm so grateful to them. And I also wonder if me naming them harms their career. I mean, so it was Terry White, who's a great writer, and Polly Vernon. I remember that a couple months after October 7th, I was nominated for a literary prize for the first time, like actually weirdly for the first time in my career. It was so exciting. There were 4 judges. And in the process of waiting to see, I didn't win, but in the process of waiting, I went on the Instagram of one of the 4 judges, and she was not just posting anti-Israel stuff, which is, par for the course. She was posting, Israelis are doing this to harvest the organs of Palestinians. She was posting recipes she would use if Hamas ever came to her house so she could cook them all dinner.
Oh, boy.
And that was one of the judges of my work, in which, my Jewishness is always part of the story. I talked to my agent and said, is there anything we can do? And we just kind of there's nothing that can be done. We didn't say anything. We didn't want to be, we get told every single time that we're playing the victim. And all I can say is that there's a lot of very left-wing white English people who've been terrible, and that probably the people who've checked in on me the most have been my Muslim friends. They've really gone out of their way. So that's meant something for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On a upbeat note about your book, is it going to be a movie?
So that's an interesting thing too. It's actually been optioned as a television series by the people who make Slow Horses, as a miniseries. And that fascinated me because the book, when it was optioned, the book hadn't come out yet. And of all my books, it's the one that got the most offers. Like there was a bidding for the screen rights to this book. So I'm fascinated too, given the experience I then had with publishing it, being so different and having no support, or feeling like I had no support, even though it got tremendous reviews. I had, so the Guardian route was amazing. The author Jonathan Coe picked it as his book of the summer. There's something in it that didn't. Well, actually, the woman I ended up going with was Greek, and she told me that she recognized in the book, like, all the dynamics were stuff she understood and could relate to. And I think that's also true in the United Kingdom, that it kind of doesn't matter what minority you're from. Ethnic minorities in Britain recognize a lot of the same stuff, about being here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, being American and in Canada, and now on paper, Canadian, culturally probably pretty American. I do sometimes think just that it has nothing to do with, a little to do with my personality, because I've chose to become an opinion writer, but like, I'm the whole sort of like thing of being evasive, whispery, apologetic about Jewishness, just, I wouldn't even think to do this. But I don't think it's so much about my character. And I think it's more about, like, I grew up in New York City, where this was just not a remarkable thing about me. And in Canada, I see the British way a bit, like, it's somewhere in between, maybe.
Yeah.
So I know what it is. I more often see it in some British Jews, like that sort of like what Ezra does, of the sort of like not wanting to draw too much attention to the Jewish. It's like, I see it a little bit in Canada. It would be hard for me to imagine it in the States. It's just not something, it's not a way of being that really exists in the same way.
There's also like, you know, I don't know, off the top of my head, two incredibly rarefied British Jews would be the director Sam Mendes and Stephen Fry. And you wouldn't know that they're Jewish because what they read as is very upper class, you know, very, very rarefied. So that stuff, that having an American Jewish mother and an English Jewish father, I always see that divide over and over. My dad was sent to boarding school when he was really little in order specifically to become less identifiably Jewish.
I could ask you questions about all of this truly all day and for weeks and years on end, because so many things to talk about. It is, however, a podcast. So I'm going to have to thank you so much for coming on The Jewish Angle. I'm going to have to, again, recommend Father Figure. And where can people find your work apart from your book?
Well, so Canada's been a good market for me with my memoir, Your Voice in My Head, which came out 10 years ago and has always sold pretty well there. So you can get that. And if you're ordering from the UK, Father Figure, Blackwell's deliver for free. So I recommend Blackwell's.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. This has been Phoebe Maltz Bovy, opinion editor of the CJN and a contributing editor of Scribe Quarterly, the CJN's print magazine. The show is produced and edited by Michael Fraiman. Our music is by Frank Freeman. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to The Jewish Angle wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.